when we're cut off from certain parts of us, we become numb to those parts of ourselves. And the opposite of numbness is aliveness. And so the thing that can get us back to this deep sense of feeling alive is through the thing that controls our whole system, and that is our breath, which we're not taught this in school. We're not taught this in anything.
Welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast, where we talk about everything from spirituality, self-development, relationships, mindfulness, wellness, and everything that will help you embrace all that you are so you can expand into the best version of yourself. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. So today I am really excited to bring a very special guest on who has made a massive impact in my life. Those of you who have been listening to the podcast since the beginning have heard me and many of the other guests talk about somatic breathwork and the amazing benefits that it can provide. Well, our guest today is the man behind somatic breathwork. He has helped myself and thousands of others to come back to who they truly are by connecting with their body and their breath in a way that frees you from the shackles that our subconscious has on us. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to my teacher, mentor, and guide, Steven Jaggers. Steven, welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast.
Adam, thank you for the incredible intro, brother. I really appreciate it. And it's been an honor to watch your evolution. You've been with us since the beginning, really since the beginning of Somatic, and just having you on the team, just learning from you as well. I know it's been a long time coming for this conversation, and I'm really excited to dive in with you.
Well, that's honestly one of the things that I love so much about somatic breathwork is that it's so oriented around community and around all of us learning from each other. Because, I mean, the truth is, no matter how specialized we may be in certain areas of our life, none of us know everything. And we really can learn so much more by being in a community and being open to hearing what others have to say, and recognize that even though we may feel like we know the truth, we can get new information that changes that truth and really helps us to shift our perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Community is everything. I mean, that's why I love this modality, because it's, there's a lot of stuff you can do yourself, but most of our healing, most of our growth, it happens with other people. We are communal beings. And I truly believe that, one of our greatest purposes here is to commune, is to be in community, is to be in deep communication with each other. And, that's a big mission on Somatic's front for the world.
Well, it's a mission that in my eyes has been very successful so far. So I know many of the listeners are going to be familiar with you. They're going to be familiar with somatic breathwork, but I also know that there's many that aren't going to be familiar. And so for those of the listeners that don't know your backstory, don't really know much about somatic breathwork, have maybe heard about breathwork before, would you mind taking just a little bit of time to kind of tell us a little bit about your backstory and really what got you to the point of wanting to create somatic breathwork as a modality?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it has come from my upbringing and my parents. I was born an only child. My parents struggled with a lot of heavy addiction, with really, really hard drugs before they had me, and into, probably until I was about 5. And I watched them, from a young age. You're so sensitive. You're picking up on everything. Like we truly co-regulate with the people that we're around before we even learn self-regulation. As a child, you're attuning to your parents, and you are picking up everything. A lot of the times, you take it on for yourself. So I could feel the level of anxiety and depression and struggle that was very apparent in their body and in their field. And, I watched them get clean from these hard drugs and quickly switch to prescription medications, which, I watched every couple months or so switching prescription meds to a new one. And they're like, okay, this one's going to make me feel better, and this one's going to help me. And, fast forward into into, junior high and high school, I was always such an athletic kid. I loved being very physical, and I was always a kid out running the streets, playing hide and go seek and tag and basketball and skateboarding, and I'd play all the sports, and I love being in my body. And a big reason I think that is because when you're in your body, you're not thinking about what's going on at home. You're not thinking about what's going on in the future and the past. You're really forced into the present moment when you're in your body. And so outside of that, there was a deep driving force inside of me to probably want to help my parents, but I witnessed those same patterns in the parents of my friends and within, my teachers, and just around society. I think I always had a deep level of sensitivity on people's internal suffering, and it caused me to want to study addiction psychology, and also physical therapy. I couldn't decide which route I wanted to go. There it was the mind route or the body route, and I ended up. I would say that I probably have a little bit of ADHD, and I was not good at necessarily the books and taking in information and spewing it back up and writing essays, and so I ended up just dropping out. And I ended up finding a bodywork school that taught a lot of Eastern forms of bodywork, energy work, and also Western forms of injury rehabilitation, and diving in and having some incredible mentors and somatic psychology, and how the body stores emotions and how that affects our mind. I'm really thankful I had some incredible mentors early on. And as soon as I got my hands on someone's body, and I could feel and tune into how much the body is actually holding a lot of the stuff that we're struggling, and watching people become free in their body, align their body, and how that affects their mind. It just, as soon as I started to see it happening in front of my eyes, I became so fascinated. And I just began to study all these different modalities, from, cranial sacral therapy to polarity therapy to somatic release body work to neuromuscular therapy, and a lot of injury rehabilitation stuff as well, and postural restoration. And I fell in love with it, man. I was a body worker for a long time, and my mentors, I was so keen on just learning as much as I could. I probably was like, stuck to them, just like as like a little suction cup. And they were like, "Hey, like, you want to be my assistant instructor?" And I'm like, "Okay, yes, let's do that." And I ended up falling in love with teaching. That they kind of brought me up into teaching a lot of these classes. And I think I fell in love even more with teaching than I actually did with doing the actual sessions. It lit me up to see light bulbs connect for people. And within teaching, it's like the best way to really be able to teach something is to move through it yourself. And the best way to teach, to learn something, is to teach it. So there was this back and forth of, I'm processing my own stuff and I'm learning how to teach it. And it allowed me to package up information in so many different ways, because everyone digests information differently. And when you really understand something, you can attune to them, and then you can package up this information in a way that's digestible for them specifically. And so I fell in love with that process. I'll fast forward from there. I was teaching, I was doing body work. I was, helping run sort of an injury rehab center in Arizona. And at that time I was doing a lot of emotional and energetic work with people on the side. And at that point in time, I was kind of going through an awakening process for myself. And this had started a few years before that. I started having a stint of lucid dreams, and like, I started going down the rabbit hole and looking into altered states of consciousness and the energy body and the astral body and the emotional body. And it blew my mind wide open. And within there, I started studying different plants and herbs to support lucid dreaming. And then that led me into psychedelics. And I was in the psychedelic space for a little bit. And at one point I was like, okay, well, I need to study this because this is helping people on a deep, deep level, like it was helping me. So I volunteered for this nonprofit organization called MAPS, which is dedicated to the study of psychotherapy in conjunction with a lot of these plant medicines. And during that, I thought that was going to be my route of going back to school to become a psychedelic psychotherapist, if you will. And right as the last day of this conference is going on, I hear about this holotropic breathwork session by a man named Stan Groff, who is kind of the father of a lot of these modern breathwork modalities as far as like a lot of the trauma release and stress relief and deeper journey style breathworks. And I took that session and I had more physical release, more physical, like I felt this massive pop in the center of my spine, in my solar plexus. And when I was about 17, I went to the doctor because I was having some spinal issues. And he told me that I had a little bit of fusing in my thoracic spine, right in my solar plexus, for those who kind of know the chakra system. And, going down that rabbit hole of studying your solar plexus is your fire center. And my parents were addicted to stimulants, and this was the thing that they had passed on to me. And so I ended up having this kind of pop in my thoracic spine when I was breathing. I was getting to deep layers of tension within my diaphragm. And then all of a sudden these emotions started flowing through me. I experienced deep rage and anger, and I was yelling at the top of my lungs. And then all of a sudden it switched to crying and sadness. And then after that was like bliss and ecstasis. And all of a sudden there was this point that was like, I had been studying body work this whole time. I had been fascinated with the nervous system. And I had always considered myself a body worker and a teacher. But I had this, I cleared so much. I had this moment of lucidity and clarity that I'm like, shit, I'm actually a breath worker first. I am attuning to people's breath, whether I'm aware of it or not. And anybody who's working with another human is attuning to breath, whether you know it or not, because your breath is the number one driving force or the number one control center of your nervous system and the state of your nervous system. And if someone is holding their breath, whether you're coaching them, whether you're personal training them, whether you are, doing body work or the actual therapy, if someone's holding their breath, they're in a defensive state and they're not open to a repatterning of the story of the actual body and the neural kinetic patterns. And so I'm like, I'm going to study breath work. I've studied all different types of breath work, and through that process, and right at the beginning of COVID, I had this moment that I was just like, I'm gonna stop everything I'm doing. Like the world stopped, and I had a client who was like, I had been working with her and I had been doing body work. I had been doing breath work. I had been doing all of the different modalities that I learned with her. And she was like, I want to teach, I want to learn what you do. And she was a therapist working with clients. And I was like, at that point, I had another lucid moment that was like, I know how to create a lesson plan. I know I love teaching. I miss teaching, and let's create this protocol. And then, if I can get 4 or 5 people in my house, if I'm lucky to run this thing. And I ended up doing a couple small trainings in my house. And now it's grown to where, we have you on the team as one of our lead instructors, and we're helping, we've had over 1,000 people take our training. And it's just been, I never would have ever thought that this would grow to this capacity. And I never had that planned. But there's been multiple signs and signals that the world has given us, that the world is asking to feel deeply, to reconnect to the intelligence of their body, to remember themselves, to put all the pieces of themselves back together. And in turn, it's it's asked a lot from us, and we continue to figure out how to show up in the way that it wants over and over and over again.
Yeah, man. I've heard parts of that story several times just throughout all of the trainings that we've been through together, but to continue to hear the context in which you dove in yourself to learn yourself, to learn all of the areas in which you'd been affected by your parents, by your upbringing, and just by life in general. And we're able to go there continues to prove that we can only go as deep as we've gone ourselves. And
Absolutely.
you talking about your holotropic breathwork session and feeling that immense rage and then going through all of the emotions that came behind that made me think and remember back to the in-person training that I did with you in Phoenix last December, and going through much of that same stuff and all tailored around my childhood as well. And at one point in time, you came and helped put your hand on my chest, and it was like, I'm held, I'm safe, I'm okay to be feeling all of this, and I don't have to bottle it up anymore. And like that gave me the permission to open up so much more and to feel so much more. And it's been incredible the shifts that have happened in my life since then. And like I thought my life changed in early 2022 when I took the training, the
Yeah.
online training, and it did change, but not in the same way that it did after I took the in-person training. And that's where I think it's a beautiful point that you guys have created such a container that tailors to people learning differently. The
Yeah.
online course allows people to learn at a very slow pace and digest
Yeah.
everything very, very slowly while still giving a lot of information, but giving information in a visual form, in a written form, in an experiential form. So again, you guys are still tailoring to everybody's different learning styles. But then you add the in-person training on top of that, where you actually get the experiential training. And it's proven so many times for me at how much love and dedication you guys have poured into creating what it is that's somatic breathwork today. And you guys are still changing it. I mean, you're still trying to
Yeah.
improve and make it better and better, which is, in my opinion, what makes somatic breathwork stand out so much from a lot of the other breathwork trainings and other modalities that I've personally taken, where they're still teaching the same thing that they were teaching 10 or 20 years ago, and it
Yeah.
hasn't
Yeah.
really changed, but the world has changed. Everything has changed.
Man, you're spot on there, Adam. And that is something that I continue to juggle. And that is that question right there. And I'll phrase it as a question, because that question, I think everyone who's in a helping profession needs to continuously ask themselves is what I'm doing actually helping people to the best of my capacity?
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning, when I was doing body work, when I was doing that, I'm like, is what I'm doing helping people to the best of my capacity? Yes. And then I start doing that modality for a while, and then it's like, I feel like there's more. I want to learn more. And so I would study other things, like, and I would continue to run it through that filter of, is what I'm doing actually helping people? And I think and just continuing to follow that route. And I think I'm at a point right now, it never ends, because you always can learn more. And anybody that says that they have the body, the mind, the spirit, any of it completely figured out is lying to you. And even though, we've worked with thousands and thousands of people and seen just absolute incredible transformations, I still ask myself, is what I'm doing actually helping people? And through that lens allows us to continue to add, take things away, refine as we go. And it's going to be an evolutionary process. And I think so many people ask me, where do you see this going, or what do you want to do? Like, what's the goal of this? And it's been really hard to tune into what is the actual goal, because life, it's like I have to continue to, and this goes back to doing my own work and as a team doing our work as well. Like every layer of evolution that you move through, whether it's through a business, whether it's through a relationship, whether it's through your own healing journey, it requires you to go back in and do work and dive in deeper in yourself so that you can expand from that place, right? It's that internal journey, so going down, digging the roots even deeper so that you can expand even more. And I truly feel like the past 2.5, 3 years of this journey has been, the world has asked for a lot of expansion from me and building and growing, and the past couple months for myself has been like, I've been doing I just went and did a session with Fish last weekend, and I had probably even a deeper release than that first session, that holotropic session. I had the most guttural cries and screams and yells, and I'm just saying that it doesn't stop as you continue. Like it's new levels, and that requires you to go inward even more.
Yeah, I mean, that really makes me think of the definition that you guys give for holding space. Having developed the ability to experience the fullest capacity in the present moment through witness consciousness. And then
Yeah.
not being reactively evolved, but being response able. And
Yeah.
so that means that you can continue to develop a greater capacity to experience the present moment equal to the capacity that you've experienced in and of yourself. So it's like, just like what you were saying of like, as you continue to expand by doing this work and uncovering greater and greater depths to yourself, you also uncover a greater ability to have more capacity, to be able to handle more, to be able to deal with the stresses of the world. And the studio now looks a little bit different than it has for most of the episodes that have been available on YouTube, because I'm back where the podcast started, and that's in our bus. And we just
Yeah.
drove 3,200 miles across the country. And anybody who's done long road trips knows nothing goes as planned. Like there's always something that comes up that creates levels of stress. But this trip was different than all of the other trips that I've taken in the last 5 years in the bus, because everything that came up, I was able to deal with it without getting immediately stressed, with being able to see the
Yeah.
bigger picture of like, okay, what is this situation trying to tell me? Okay, we need to slow down. Okay, we need to not stay here. We need to keep moving. And being able to see that all is a result of the work that I've done over the last couple of years with you guys. You know,
Yeah.
just continuing to clear out that stuff that holds me in that stressed state.
You'll know when you're growing, when you become dysregulated. You have, because we're going to get dysregulated. We're going to get
Yeah.
stressed out. Like there's going to be things that, and this is the process of building resilience, which I would consider resilience is kind of a byproduct of building your capacity. But you'll know that you're growing is when you get to that place of overwhelm and stress, and you feel like you're like, oh wow, okay, I am over capacity. And at that point you're like, but I can expand and I can hold more, and I can actually regulate myself within that new layer. And it doesn't stop. And it's so cool to hear you repeat that definition back to me, because it's like, oh shit, I'm getting more just from hearing that. Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot, and a lot of the times when things grow rapidly, like that can be traumatic in a way. Like I would say the growth of Somatic has been one of the most stressful things I've gone through. And at the same time, one of the most beautiful, synchronistic, service-based things that I've ever been through in my life. And I don't think that any of us want a life that is simple or easy. We want to feel fulfilled, and that takes going through that hard shit and expanding ourselves and being able to expand that capacity into it. That growth does happen when there is stressful, when you are faced with a challenge and you're able to rise up and find a way to regulate yourself within it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes me think of the saying of anything worth doing isn't going to be easy, and anything that's easy
Yeah,
isn't necessarily worth doing.
dude, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a big mission, I think, on the front of Somatic and myself, is that to understand that, trauma and stress and, hard situations, it actually creates growth. I mean, there's this term that's gaining a lot of popularity called post-traumatic growth. And it's showcasing by research that the people that have gone through significant trauma afterwards, if they're able to find new adaptive patterns, if they're able to, they have an opportunity to grow extensively from it and to be able to support others within that way, because they've been there, they've walked it, they understand it in a deep way. And it really, it becomes an embodiment of you.
Yeah.
And people feel it from you. It's communicated from your nervous system.
Right. Yeah, people can feel that level of regulation. I mean, if I've met up with old friends that I haven't seen for ages when I came back for a trip to visit Washington several months ago, and I ran into a buddy at the grocery store and he's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you look exactly the same way that you did in high school, but you seem so much
You
different.
feel different.
Yeah, and it's like, I've just been listening to myself and following my truth, trying to
Yeah.
find what success means to me in life, not what success was told to me should be like.
Yeah. Your field, the electromagnetic field around you is clear because you're not carrying around the weight of the past.
Yeah.
Like inside of the training, we teach that, the past is not what happened yesterday or last year or, months ago. It's what stayed with you. The past is not, before. It's the things that stayed with you. And those things that stay with you start to create your future because they're felt within yourself, and they're felt within other people around you. Your nervous system is your electrical system, is your chakra system. It is the communication system that's being communicated from you. And it's the way in which it's the primal way that we communicate, is that felt sensation that when I'm around you, you can feel what's being communicated from me, and I can feel what's being communicated from you. And when your field, your electrical bubble around you is clear, it's felt by everyone around you. And there's nothing that needs to be said. It's said through your presence, through just being with them.
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to, I've felt this way with old friends and family, and I go spend some time around them, and they're like, what's up with you? Like, you just have this glow around you. And I think before, there was a drive inside of me, and it probably was a well-intentioned drive to want to like fix and change everyone else around me. I don't know which quote it is, but it, be the change. It really is true. If you do the work for yourself, you don't have to go and try to change other people, because your presence, your electrical field around you, they'll feel it. And they'll ask you, just like your friend said, what's going on, man? What are you doing?
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing with somatic breathwork, is it's, like a lot of modalities, it's all about the practitioner and what they can do for the patient or what they can do for the client. But with somatic breathwork, it's back to that witness consciousness of you are just being there to hold space for somebody else and giving them the invitation to find the answers for themselves. just through subtle
Yeah.
cues, just through the breath, and really giving the power back to the client, so the client doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, it's all you that did this. No, instead, after every single session, I love to remind people that you did that. You did all of that
Yeah.
that you experienced just with your breath.
Absolutely, man. And it's so powerful because all of our healthcare and all of our I would say therapy paradigms are the exact opposite. It's like
Yeah.
let's try to figure out what's wrong with you. Let's
Yeah.
try to figure out where you were broken. Let's try to figure out all the issues, the pathologies that you have, and let's see if we can, fix it.
Yeah.
Whereas no one is necessarily broken. A lot of times we just get stuck, and where we get stuck is in relation to ourselves and in relation to other people. And so as someone that can be like, our wounding often happens from other people, we say that all the time, and our
Mhm.
healing happens with other people because we're not designed to be alone. And so when you have someone that's like, hey, let's figure out what's wrong with you, I can try to fix you, it's more pressure on the system. It's creating the opposing force that if I'm here to fix you, then that means that you're broken. And when you have someone that's there with you, that's seeing you completely perfect in all ways, look, like, I love to just witness people in, like, I almost look at it from a cellular level. Like, all the cells that make up Atom right now are perfectly working in this symphony, this grand symphony, and it's all in tune, and it knows how to repair itself, and it's growing this incredible beard and smile that's on your face, and these beautiful eyes that I get to look into and just be in awe at the existence of you, the miracle you are as a human.
Yeah.
And when I create that felt sensation in myself, like, it's probably the first time that someone else has ever felt that. And magic happens when we're able to hold a space like that,
Yeah.
especially when they're able to go into themselves. And the breath is a powerful way. It is really our 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 life force pulsation. Our life is measured by breath when we took our first one and when we take our last one. And so when we have been cut off from certain parts of ourself, it shows up in the breath, because when we're cut off from certain parts of us, we become numb to those parts of ourselves, and the opposite of numbness is aliveness. And so the thing that can get us back to this deep sense of feeling alive is through the thing that controls our whole system, and that is our breath, which we're not taught this in school, we're not taught this in anything, which is unfortunate. But
It
that's why we
is.
got a big mission.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's back to what you said of the world is asking for this. Because I think
Yeah.
so many people, especially during the whole COVID fiasco, I think realized that we aren't being told the whole truth, and we aren't being taught the things that we should be taught. We are taught how
Yeah.
to be good employees. We're taught to how to sit and be quiet and do as we're told, instead of taught how to operate this quantum computer that we walk around in every day. Taught how can we create magic in the moment? How can we design our life around the uniqueness that is our own expression?
Yeah. And it's truly, it is a passing down of ancestral trauma and wounding. When, I mean, if you think about it, hundreds of years ago, and even if you want to go back to like medieval times, and if you just take a look at history, like, there's been so much war and fighting, and people literally having to just stay in the root chakra place where I need to find food and shelter and take care of my family, where I don't actually get to move up into my heart center or spiritual connections, or use this incredible mind to create things that are in symbiotic relationship to all of each other. And when you are stuck in that just survival instinct, what happens is you crave stasis. You crave stasis, you crave control. And our systems have been built off of control, and the opposite of control is trust. And when we're stuck in this state of defensiveness, this animalistic state of wounding, which a lot of the programs in power have understood, that if I can keep people in fear, guilt, and shame in this contracted state, well, they'll stay in this animalistic place where they make very predictable moves. Well, I can control them a lot easier. And so through that ancestral trauma of passing down, hurt people and continuing to want to maintain control, because there's a lack of trust in the amazing quantum computer that is us, and trust in the heart-centered nature of humans and our ability to heal and grow together. It's been unfortunate, but I would consider, there's a term called the transitional character. And the transitional character is the one who finds a way to metabolize the poison within the lineage. Like instead of passing down the patterns, it's the one who finds a way to, transmute the poison and become the change. And so we don't pass that down and continue it. And it very much is going to take lineages. And I try to look, like, when I step back and look at this, and maybe with somatic, like, and this movement, maybe we just laid the foundation.
Yeah.
Like, you think about some of these temples and pyramids that have been built, like, it took 300, 400, 500 years for whatever these say the pyramid. I don't know how long it took the pyramids to be built, but whatever these things that people were building a long time ago, maybe they just dedicated their whole life to, like, laying the foundation for the next generations to take it on. And when I tune into that, oftentimes there's a great amount of tears that want to come through my eyes.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to think in that term, because it just takes one generation to change everything.
It does.
And I kind of feel like, our generation, because we're pretty close in age, that it's like we are that change maker. We are the ones that have recognized that our parents did the best that they could with the knowledge and information that they had at the time. But now we have such a greater amount of information at our fingertips in every single moment, with smartphones and Google and YouTube University and all these different places that you can learn all of this new information, that it's almost like it's our responsibility to do the work necessary so the next generation doesn't have to carry that trauma.
Dude, it's so fascinating you say that, because I think of that often. I mean, if you look at our parents and our parents' parents and, just a couple of generations before us, like, they didn't live in this world or they didn't live in the age of information where they had a ton of information at their fingertips all the time. They had to just kind of listen to whatever their parents said, whatever their parents said. Like, they didn't have the vast amount of information that's being kind of, that's one, accessible, and also being kind of forced as well. But if you look at today's world, where we live in this vast amount of information, and a lot of it's over information, that there is actually, when we swing the pendulum to the other side, there is no necessarily, like, integrity filter within the information. I mean, even if you look at generations before, there's also not an integrity filter, because you're just taking on the information of what the government and what maybe the couple TV stations that you have, or radio stations, and your parents said. But right now, I think a massive part of it is we have so much information that there is an innate knowing inside that it's like, I need to connect to myself, because the only way I'm going to know whether this information is correct or lands for me, or is something that I want to base my life around, is if, when I take this information in, is it in alignment with my heart? Is it in alignment with my soul? And so that's another reason why I think people are, craving, like, somatic breath work, which is, I would call it a self-inquiry practice or a digestion practice. Most of us are overloaded on an emotional level. We're carrying so much emotional experience that hasn't been digested. We're carrying so much information that hasn't been digested. And so it is a digestion period. And what that digestion period is can I excrete all the stuff that's not in alignment with me, that I don't need? Can I absorb and assimilate the experiences that I've gone through? And maybe it's, the traumas that I've gone through and the things that I've learned from that. Maybe it's all the information that I'm taking in and the way that I want to show up in the world. Can I absorb and assimilate that on how I can align that with my purpose and the human that I want to show up as, and what I want to actually pass down to future generations? So my point in this is that I think it's another aspect of people are craving to be deeply connected to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And so speaking of that, so if those are the listeners that are listening to this and they've either heard your podcast before or seen Somatic Breathwork's Instagram, and they're like, I want to try this, but I'm scared. I'm scared to feel the things that I don't really want to feel anymore. Like, how do you approach people to get them to understand that they've got to feel it in order to heal it? They've got to face that in order to be able to expand into that new version of themselves.
To deeply answer your question around, if you are afraid to kind of take that inward journey, afraid to go into yourself, afraid to maybe feel like there's a lot down there. Well, it's got to go somewhere. And it usually takes about 90 seconds for an emotion to move through you. And so when you actually let it up and out, it's no longer harbored inside of you. And those emotions have to go somewhere. And a lot of the times they're being leaked out in your closest relationships. And when we can actually start to clear on an emotional level, we can, let ourselves feel, we can move through emotions, we become clear mentally. And when I can deeply connect to myself, then I can actually connect to other people. Because if I'm not connected to myself, then it's actually not me in connection to other people. And it takes more energy from our system to suppress, to hold things back. It takes more energy from our system to hold up a disconnected version of myself in connection with everyone else than it does for me to actually just be my authentic self and be where I am at. And a lot of the times it actually creates more trust in our relationships. I know so many people struggle with their connections and with the people that they love, because when I can actually showcase all of myself, and that first takes connecting to it yourself, then I know that you're not holding anything back from me. I'm not holding anything back from you. We can actually be in true connection with each other. And that's what we crave, is this humanness between each other.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been really incredible to watch at how, you speak on relationships and how it bleeds out into those closest relationships that we have. And, much of my trauma that I've dealt with throughout my healing journey has been surrounded around my dad and my upbringing and my relationship with him. And recently I was given the opportunity to come back and visit with my family shortly after the 4th of July. And my parents have been in the process of trying to sell their house and to move. And anybody that's dealt with that, it's an incredibly stressful situation to be in, especially when you've been in the same home for 23 years. Yeah. And I was having this conversation with my dad and trying to go over, all of the different options of things that they could do and things that we could help to kind of move things along. And he started to get very flustered. And I know that that's the inklings of an argument starting to happen and things like that. But yet, because I was able to utilize some breathing practices in that moment, I was able to maintain my center of alignment. It kind of reeled him back in. And he started to slowly calm himself back down and regulate with my nervous system. That then just allowed us to have this beautiful conversation and him to just openly share, like, I'm just really stressed out. And I don't know how to do all of this. And then
Yeah.
able to just talk through that. And so it just proves that when you do the work, you still can help other people to change just by you doing the work.
Yeah. When there's a deeper allowing that's felt within your system, like when you allow yourself, like that's felt from other people. I know within myself, like a deep pattern within me has been to be very defensive. Like, and I think I built that up like with my parents and specifically just being around a lot of arguing and a lot of just not good situations. Like I learned how to just put up this wall and to just be super defensive around things. And I notice, and it's shown up for me in multiple times in my romantic relationships where when things get tough, when we're going through those really sticky moments, like I will watch this wall come up, and it's either I just get like verbally defensive around things, or I just this wall just comes up and I'm not able to actually like I'm just like I'm not even going. I'm literally going to leave the situation, maybe not physically, but all of myself is going to leave.
Yeah.
And in those moments when I can actually regulate myself and I can calm my nervous system and I can be present with them and I cannot lose my center, I every time it's felt on their end because a lot of times there'll be a moment of vulnerability where they actually share. And the times where I get defensive, it sparks their defensiveness. Like if I bring out swords, you're going to bring out swords, and then it's
Yeah.
just going to escalate and continue. But if I relax my system when it gets heated, a lot of the times they'll feel that, and it will allow them to relax. And it is this understanding that we call co-regulation. It's how your nervous system interacts with my nervous system in a way that we attune to each other. And there can be co-regulation or there can be co-dysregulation. And speaking of like, if I bring out swords, you're going to bring out swords. Well, that's co-dysregulation and that will amplify.
Right.
Or if I'm able to like regulate myself, you oftentimes your nervous system picks that up. You can relax yourself. And then we have this nice level of attunement between each other and we can actually feel each other on a deep level.
Yeah. And it's funny because you can recognize it really easily with dogs.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
If you've got one dog that no matter what, it's just kind of always going to be in that defensive state, then any other dog that comes along, it's going to be in that defensive state. Versus if you have one dog that's just wants to play and just wants to be friends and just wants to have fun, it gives the permission to that other dog to do the same thing. And realistically, we're not that different. We all have
We're
nervous
not.
systems. We all have
Yeah.
similar, body makeup and organs and hearts and lungs and all the stuff that puts us together.
Yeah.
Yet we make it so difficult. We make it way more difficult on ourselves than we really need to by not being open to that regulation, or I guess not being open to having that awareness around that regulation.
Yeah. And when you look at, if you were to ask yourself right now, like in your life, are you happy with what you've created? Because it's like you are, I mean, there's an aspect of, you know, you're born into the world in your default setting and you get to decide what you do with it. And you have an opportunity to create from that place. But we are the creators of our world. And there is both fate and there's also free will. And I would consider fate as our defense systems, because those defense systems probably happen from trauma or different stressful situations. They're the patterns that we inherit to protect ourselves, because it's an intelligent response that when you go through something stressful, your body wants to protect you. Your being wants to protect you. It doesn't want you to feel whatever's going on. But those defensive states don't just turn off unless we kind of, unless we go do somatic breathwork or another modality like that. But those defensive states just stay on. And then when we're in that defensive state, it starts to create our reality for us, because we get into another situation. When we get defensive, well, then that just took out our human superpower, which is choice, because we no longer have choice on what we're creating, because our defense systems are making that choice for us. And so if you look at your life and what you've created so far and you're not happy with it, well, that's another reason to go inward and to look at the actual defense systems and the unprocessed emotions and the undigested shit that you have, because you are the conscious creator of your life. You just have to turn off those defenses that a lot of the times are making decisions for you without you even being aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also, it's like you were talking about that wall that goes up. And if we have this wall that constantly is this like shield in front of ourselves, it's going to, yes, shield us from the hard stuff, but it's also going to shield us from the good stuff. But it's also going to shield us from actually being able to create a reality that we want, because there's this filter that's now in front of us. There's this hurdle that the universe has to go over to try and give you the life that it's always trying to create for you. And I used to hold that victim mentality a lot of, woe is me. Why does this always have to happen to me? Like, why is and it wasn't until I realized that it was because I was trying to create a life that was out of alignment with what I truly wanted and desired.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the patterns that we utilize to protect ourselves from pain and protect ourselves from different things, although they are so intelligent and they help us tremendously, a lot of the times they become the thing that block us the most. And so we get stuck with those defense systems on. We get stuck with the patterns that, what I say is, it's what's adaptive at some point becomes maladaptive later on. And so it's not the process of shaming yourself or being hard on yourself for all of the defense systems or the choices. Like, everyone's just running their patterns. You start to not take things as personal too when you're around other people, because you start to just realize like that's the patterns that they're running right now.
Yeah.
And it's probably from a wounded place. And in our world, and this is another reason like why I think somatic is growing, because we've lost the communal, empathetic witness type containers of being able to release these defense systems and see our full spectrum humanness, because that's how we turn these defense systems off, is feeling, is moving it through us. Whatever's coming, whatever's pushed down, suppressed, it's the act of letting it become expressed and letting it move through you that sends a signal to your system that you don't have to actually hold that defense system anymore. When it's still inside of you, then you still, there's a feeling inside that I have to keep this defense system up because I haven't let myself fully feel what I actually went through.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And not allowing yourself to feel that is only going to continue that limited capacity. And not allowing that energy to move through you is, like you said earlier, it's only going to take more energy. Like, trying to keep it bottled up takes more energy than just feeling it and letting it out. Even though sometimes in the moment it's like, oh my gosh, I know I felt exhausted after that in-person training just because of the really powerful sessions that I had. But once my system was actually able to come back into regulation and was able to, I look at it as like it was a hard reset. So my whole system had to completely reprogram itself to now adapt to this new amount of energy that was available, because I was no longer holding on to that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, we are a verb. We are a process. We are a change. And especially in a 4-day in person 9 to 5, like that's a lot. It's a lot more than just going in for an hour and a half inward, like I think that, if you're afraid to go in for an hour, you're probably afraid to sit with yourself for an hour. So maybe you can look at that as well. And if you're afraid of your breath, you're afraid of your life, because your life is measured by breath.
Yeah.
And we are expression vessels. There is a deep, innate craving to just express ourselves, to dance, to sing, to create art. We are creators. Like everything that you see in this video has been created from a human and from nature, but from a human as well. And at first it's like on a very instinctual and animalistic level, like we have to learn to express our emotions, to express the deep parts of ourselves. And then it becomes about how do I use it all? How do I use my full spectrum existence to channel it into some form of art? And then beyond that, it's like, how do I channel that art form into something that provides value and helps other people? Because like I said in the beginning of this, we are communal beings, and we want to feel like we are making other people's life better.
Yeah. So Steven, we could go on this topic for hours on end, I'm sure. But for the sake of everybody's time and yours as well, what is the one thing that you had to embrace in your life in order to expand into the person you are today?
I mean, there's been a lot, man. There's been a lot. I mean, I think throughout this journey, there was, I mean, even dropping out of, traditional schooling, and, my parents, God bless them. I'm so thankful that they never like forced a religion on me. They never forced like a specific career path, or they kind of were just like, just don't do what we did. Like, go figure it out. Don't do what we did. But there was a lot of times where I was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go get a job that, will have success guaranteed at the end of it. I mean, there was a lot of times where I told people I was going to school for body work, and they're like, you're going to go to school to touch people? Like, what's wrong with you? Like you have so much potential. And there was a lot of, there was multiple years where I was studying like energy work and a lot of woo-woo stuff that people were just like, you're crazy. A lot of the people that I went to high school with, and even friends and family. And I'm really thankful I was able to embrace just that inner knowing that this is what feels good to me. And at some point, like if it feels good to me, that's what matters more than anything. And at some point, the world will find value of this. If I continue this thread that's in alignment with my soul and my purpose, and what feels good to me, that none of it matters besides that. And at some point, like, I know the world will value it. And I'm so thankful I continue to like embrace that internal voice that told me to just keep going. And as each fork in the road, I would tune in and listen to that, and I'd go down that route, and it wouldn't make any sense to my mind, like living out of my car for a year, or, starting this business with like a couple $1,000s to my name, and so many different things. But embracing that internal voice, and just doing it because it feels right to me, and not because the world is telling me this is what you need to do.
Well, I know I can speak for myself and probably thousands of other people how thankful we are that you embrace that inner voice and you chose to go down the path that you are, because I truly believe, and I say this all the time to clients, but somatic breathwork is literally changing the world.
I hope to, and I will, and it's a massive responsibility to continue to just keep myself clear, to continue to do the work for myself, and to continue to just become a vessel for how it wants to grow and evolve in the world, and people that want to join. And Yeah, it's such, when I tune into it, it's such an honor. I never would have thought that this is what I'd be doing with my life, but this is exactly how I want to feel. And it's a massive responsibility. And I make the vow to continue to show up the best possible way that I can for everyone involved.
Yeah, well, you've definitely been a great example for me in my life, and something that I continually to work on, just being a better person and just doing as much as I can do to shift myself so that I can see those ripples that get sent out into the world.
Yeah. Well, I know you've created so many ripples, brother. And it's been an honor to drop in with you. And I know this is the first one of many, as we kind of just, skim the surface on so many things. Like, we
Yeah,
can definitely drop in on specific stuff next time.
definitely, definitely. Well, Stephen, what is one last piece of advice that you would offer the listeners before you go today?
One last piece of advice. I get asked this one a lot, and I try to come up with something new each time. Lately, I really tune into that the purpose of our life is to create art and share it with other people. So that's what brings the most happiness to me. And that's when I feel the closest to God. And I would look at and consider somatic breath work and just holding space and doing sessions like a deep art form that I'm privileged to do and share with other people. So whoever you are, no no time is ever wasted when you are participating in art and sharing it with other people. So find your art form and share it with others.
That's fantastic advice, Stephen. That is definitely one of the better answers I think I've received to that question, because that's really is it's trying to just treat art, or treat life, as our greatest work of art.
Yeah, our life is our living art form, and we are figuring it out as we go. Right. That's when I had that realization. I was probably about 25, and I was like, how come everyone has it all figured out? Like, I got to figure out what I'm doing with my life. And I'm sitting there with, when I love to just sit with words and break words down. And I'm just like figuring, like, what does it mean to figure? And I thought about like a like ceramics class where you're just like figuring the the clay into a mold, and it's a figuring process. Like, you're figuring it into shape, and your life is a figuring process, and it's never figured out until it's done. So enjoy the figuring and use that figuring as your canvas, and it'll continue, and you'll have to continue figuring it out, and it's never figured out until we're ready to be put in the oven.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Wow, what a great way to look at it, and at how you might start out thinking that it's going to be a bowl, but then maybe it turns itself into a cup, or maybe it turns
Yeah.
itself just back into a wad of mud. Like, you never
Yeah.
know. You just got to be okay with the process in which life is trying to create through you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom to the podcast and being here. If those are the listeners that are really interested in connecting with you more, maybe signing up for one of the upcoming courses, what's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, you can connect with us at somaticbreathwork.com. Check us out on YouTube, almost all, or Instagram, almost all the platforms. If you want to connect with me personally, my Instagram is at JaggersJR. As you can tell, I love to just kind of nerd out on this stuff all the time. So message me and we can chat.
Yeah. And as always, I'll have all of Steven's information in the show notes below so you guys can easily find it. If you are interested in breath work and learning more about this wonderful modality, I highly, highly suggest looking at the resources that are available on all of the socials, checking out somaticbreathwork.com, and hopefully you'll be able to actually meet us both in an upcoming training. So, Steven,
Absolutely.
thanks again for being here, and really do appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, appreciate you so much, Adam. And I'll say the last thing is that if you, if you have not already, I would highly recommend going and getting a session from Adam. He is,
Oh,
he's an incredible practitioner.
well, I had really good teachers.
So. It's an honor. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Steven. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on your social media platforms, tagging myself, Embrace and Expand, and Steven Jaggers, so we can see how much you all enjoyed this beautiful episode. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being awesome humans, and I'll catch you on the next one.